Welcome, and thank you for clicking on this video. Welcome to episode number 2 in a series where I will be comparing and shooting out a whole variety of short scale bass strings. In this episode, we're going to be checking out the high beams from DR Strings. Our test bass today is going to be this Player 2 series Fender Mustang bass. Let's check these DRs out. In episode number 1, I compared the Dario Pink Pack XLs up against nickel roundwounds from Stringjoy. The test bass in that episode was my custom Warmouth double reverse P bass, the green one over there. Now, to make the series a little bit more applicable to more viewers, the test bass from now on is going to be this Fender Player 2 PJ Mustang bass. And if you want to check out my review on this bass, I will leave a link in the description box below. In episode number 2, we're going to be checking out the DR high beams. These are quite different than the stock strings found on the Fender Mustang PJ. These are stainless steel with a round core, whereas the Fender Player 2 Mustang is advertised to have Fender nickel roundwounds, and those I believe have a hex core. On with a sonic comparison. I'm going to put both of these sets of strings on this bass up against the drum track so we can hear the sonic differences. Why against the track, you ask? Well, the sonic differences only matter if you can hear it in the context of a mix or in the context of other instruments. Sometimes the sounds we hear in our bedrooms or in our basement studios can sound great by themselves, but sometimes those sounds can get completely lost in a mix on a stage or in the studio. So that's why I'm doing all of these comparisons up against the drum track. We're going to have several passes to this comparison track. In the first half, we're going to be using only the neck P pickup, where I have the tone controls at 100% and then at 50. And then in the second half, we're going to use both the P and the J together, and like the first half, with the tone knob at 100% and then at 50. In this comparison, the signal chain will be identical with both sets of strings, and I have ensured that the string to pickup height is the same with both sets of strings. Okay, let's go. Please let me know what you thought of the tones by leaving a comment below. Okay, let's first start by talking about the packaging of these DRs. These come in what DR is calling their corrosion-proof envelopes. They just feel like recycled paper to me, so I'm not entirely sure what type of technology has gone into these corrosion-proof envelopes. You should, however, note that they are not sealed. So unlike the Darrow XLs, which come in that kind of airtight package, these were not sealed and they were just left open. Whether or not this truly works, I don't actually know, but the strings came out pretty fresh, so no complaints in that department. And now in episode 1, we looked at the string wound length of some of these strings, and we kind of lamented the fact that a lot of these string manufacturers do not actually publish their string wound lengths on their website, or at least not in a readily available way. Now, ideally, you want the first step, taper, or where the silk begins, to be in between the nut and the tuner. That way, you don't have the full gauge string wrapping around the post. Now, I'm going to put up a photo here so you can have a closer look. On the E string of these DR high beams, the first step taper is right at the level of the tuning post, not before. Have a look at this photo. When you put a measuring tape up to it, the effective string wound length of this DR high beam measures at 33¼ inches. The interesting observation here with these DR high beams is that the string wound length was different for all 4 strings. So both the stock Fender nickel round wounds and these DR high beams were both 105 to 45 in gauge. On installation, however, these DRs are probably slightly lower in tension compared to the Fenders because the action was a bit low. And I did need to raise the saddles of all 4 strings up just a little bit to get the string to pickup height to be the same. So there's another interesting observation. In terms of how they feel, Now, many, many years ago, I was a long time user of DR high beams on my F-Bass, and I loved how they sounded. But the biggest drawback to the DR high beams that I found at that time was the coarser texture of the windings on your fingers. It does take some getting used to. It feels quite a bit coarser and rougher compared to most nickel round wounds, including the stock Fenders and something more common like the Dario XL nickels. These I felt were even rougher than the string joys that we had in episode 1. So that will take some getting used to. As well, fresh out of the box, the high beams feel a bit on the stickier side as well. But after you play them for a few hours to a few days, that stickiness does go away. And that's from previous experience. Now, in terms of perceived string tension, in other words, how stiff do they feel under my fingers, compared to the Fender stock nickel round wounds, these DRs did feel a little bit slinkier or a little bit looser in perceived string tension. So I actually felt they were easier to play from a how much pressure do I need to depress the string and to pluck the string, which did make it a more comfortable experience from that point of view. Now, in terms of tones, the stock nickel round wounds had a pronounced low-mid hump to them. It was almost woofy in character, and some of the notes lacked clarity, and when you have the tone knob all the way up, it can potentially get kind of a little clanky in an unpleasant way. These DRs, however, do not have that low-mid hump that the Fenders had. In fact, these strings sound a bit scooped to me. I actually would describe it as a much more modern stainless steel sound. So what I would say is if you are looking for kind of an old school thump, the DR high beams are not the strings for you. However, if you are looking for a little bit of a kind of a string zing or a little bit of a ping to the note where if you really dig in, you can get that metallic string character, then I think the DR high beams has that type of sound in spades. In fact, even when I'm chugging on the lower strings, it almost sounds like it has a bit of an overdrive character to the note, which I find pleasing for rock genres or something where you just want to lay in and get that kind of brighter string, zingier, ting, 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 ting type sound. So if you want to cut through that way, I think the DR high beams will be great for that kind of application. And that was exactly why I used it on my old F-Bass. It just had that metallic string sound. But compared to the Fender nickels though, they did sound less round. They were a little bit lower in output compared to the Fender rounds. And it didn't have kind of the same thick bottom that the Fenders had. So it did sound a little thinner in the lows. However, it didn't have the same kind of clackiness that the Fenders had. I found the high end to be much more pleasant to listen to on these DRs. Another thing I'll add about these DR high beams is that they are slightly less forgiving with bad frets. Let me explain what I mean. If your frets are not smooth in texture, or if you have a few frets that are slightly higher than others, the bright stainless windings on these strings will tend to bring out those inconsistencies way more than nickel round wounds. And especially in the case of these Fenders, I've found the DR high beams on this bass was much less forgiving. And in fact, in the comparison track I played, that C sharp I played, you will hear that the string kind of grounds out a little bit, just a hair more than the other frets, and that was much more exposed compared to the Fender nickels. So, got to make sure your frets are good if you're going to use stainless steel strings. All right, thank you very much for watching this episode. In episode number 3, I'm going to be checking out the DR Sunbeams, and we'll put the high beams up to the Sunbeams. Those two strings are, at least on paper, probably going to sound quite different. So let's see which one you like better. Stay tuned. Until next time, peace.